What I see most often is that we have an overemphasis on the therapy and the clinical innovation of the therapy, which in and of itself is extremely exciting. And I don't want to discredit that. I think that's what is so wonderful about the space is that it is so innovative. It's often treating potentially a rare disease or more prominently more prevalent diseases. So we have an overemphasis on maybe the scientific advancement of that, which is wonderful, but then an underinvestment in the system around it. And so some common readiness gaps that I see includes really that fragmented ownership across departments. Often we work in our own silos, and so we have immature workflows for referral and prior authorization, maybe underdeveloped financial modeling. So that fails to account for maybe looking at cash flow, timing, denied claims, or even patient attrition. So then the gaps that pose the greatest risk to patient safety, as far as I can see, is kind of again that unclear escalation pathway, maybe not having the appropriate outpatient monitoring infrastructure. Limited staff experience is a big part of this because these therapies can have unique toxicities. And then, these really innovative therapies are very expensive. And so financially, we are treating cell and gene therapy like traditional oncology reimbursement, maybe without understanding the risks for site of care, product acquisition, and maybe even potentially payer carve-outs. So the programs don't fail because the science doesn't work. We're definitely proving scientifically that they're working, but they fail because our infrastructure can't absorb that complexity. I think what is challenging for executives at the start is you see this ginormous hurdle and you don't really even know how to begin. And so I think in practice, launching a cell and gene therapy program is less about building something entirely new, but rather looking at how you can intentionally design or maybe redesign what already exists. So, having dedicated physical space can help, but when you first stand up a program, maybe you don't need that right away. We see that physical space can help maybe if you're looking to do primarily an outpatient cell therapy program. But that's not necessarily always required at the very beginning. But what is required is making sure that you have access to appropriate infusion areas, looking at maybe the cold chain handling of these medications, and then really that clearly defined patient flow. Then when you think about the team and the team size, that can vary by volume also, right? Like you don't necessarily need to have all new staff to do this work. Like, how can we make sure that the roles that you do have already in place, how can those roles be further expanded and that where they can be clearly accountable? Even if they're not fully dedicated early on, maybe looking at accountability with program leadership, pharmacy, nursing, financial coordination, and this really big part of data and quality oversight. Now, here at KU, our experiences have been more that it's shared resources that work initially, but success really is hinging on the clarity of ownership, standardized workflows. I can't emphasize that enough, and then leadership alignment. So, as our volume has continued to grow, naturally, then those inevitably the roles become a lot more dedicated. But I am a big fan of taking really complex workflows and trying to break it down into digestible pieces. I think folks tend to relate to that a lot more easily.